So before I dive into this story, I need to tell you that this one is not about any type of monsters or supernatural creatures, or at least not the kind that you're probably expecting. So it was sent to me by a retired park ranger who worked at a national park in the western section of the United States. And he told me that he's seen his fair share of hikers going missing, bear attacks, and people who have wandered way too far off the trail. But he said there's one call that he'll never forget for the rest of his life. And he said it started just like any normal day. Now, just after the visitor center had opened earlier in the morning, an older couple had come walking inside. They were holding hands, being all lovey-dovey, and they looked like they were in their late 70s. The husband was carrying this faded envelope, and the wife was just loving all on him. They smiled at the ranger, and they explained that they needed a little help. Now, the husband, he pulled out this old photograph, and it was faded, but you could still make out a young man on one knee beside a large overlook. And he was proposing to a woman with long dark hair. And he smiled at the park ranger, and he said, I proposed to my wife here almost about 52 years ago. We came back to see it one last time, but we just can't remember exactly where it is. So the ranger, being kind, he's like, you know what, I think I recognize the general area. And he's like, I could help you. So the trail had changed, of course, a little bit over the decades, but he figured that he could absolutely help them and narrow it down. So he walked with them all the way there, and for about 2 hours, as they searched for it, these old overlooks and rock formations and bends in the trail, and then suddenly it was right there. So he pointed toward an old weathered pine grove, and he's like, oh, that looks familiar. And the wife recognized it as well, and she's like, I think that's it. So the husband smiled, and he wrapped his arm around her, and the two of them just stood there looking out over the valley in complete silence. The ranger said he almost felt kind of guilty interrupting them. So he told them, you know what, I'm going to let you have this moment, and I'm gonna head back. The couple thanked him over and over again for helping them, but before heading back, he politely reminded them, hey, just a reminder, the park is going to be closed at sunset, so just make sure that you're back before then. And the husband just laughed and smiled at him, and he's like, oh, don't worry, we won't stop you from waiting. So the ranger smiled, waved goodbye, and he headed down the trail. Hours had passed now, and the visitors were slowly leaving the park until only a few cars were left in the lot. And as the gates were preparing to close, the ranger noticed something that kind of made his stomach sink. The old couple's car was still exactly where they had left it that morning when they first came in. So he waited another, 30 minutes, and there were nothing, right? Then he waited an hour, still nothing, and there was no sign of them whatsoever. Radio calls had gone out, and their cell phones went straight to voicemail, because you have to check in and sign in, and they were calling their phone. Nothing. And by then, darkness had completely settled over the park. A search team was immediately organized, and flashlights were sweeping across the trails and the valley looking for them. Rangers were calling out their names, and for hours there was no sign of them at all. And then just around midnight, one of the searchers radioed in that he had found them, and they were exactly where the ranger had left them. They were sitting side by side beneath that same old pine tree overlooking the valley, and they were still holding hands, and neither of them were alive. Resting between them was that same faded envelope that they had shown the ranger earlier, and inside was a handwritten note, and it pretty much explained that the wife had recently been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and she had maybe a few months to live. The husband wrote that after 52 years of being together, he could not imagine watching her slowly fade away, and she didn't want him to watch her be like that either. So they decided together that the place where their life, truly became one and began would also be where it would peacefully end. The note ended with pretty much this simple message saying, if someone finds us, please don't be sad. We got 52 beautiful years that many people never do, and we simply wanted our last memory to be our first. And the ranger told me that even after all these years, he still thinks about them whenever he walks past that overlook. And he said people always ask him, oh, are the woods haunted? Do you see any crazy things out there? And his answer is pretty much the same. No, but however, you got to think, some places like that, they hold so much love that you can probably still feel it long after the people are gone. Let me know what you think in the comments.